originally an American, and
Okay.
I came to Spain many years ago. And in 1988, I was in the JFK airport in New York City with 3 children and 10 hours delay. And so to entertain them, I thought that I would take them around to visit the bookstores. And the typical story, in one of the bookstores, this book sort of jumped off the shelf and hit me on the foot. And I looked at it, and it was called Mega Brain. And it was about different kinds of technologies and exercises that you could do to improve your brain. And so I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting. So I bought the book, and as I read it, I was extremely impressed. They had 2 chapters, or 2 parts of chapters, about a place called the Monroe Institute in the United States in Virginia that used sound technology to help people get into specific states of consciousness, some of them very practical, like for accelerated learning and concentration, but other ones, they were talking about the possibilities of out-of-body experience, and I had never heard of anything like that, but it sounded so absolutely amazing that I wanted to see about this. And when I actually got there, I had signed up for a course, and between February, when I signed up, and August, my whole life sort of turned upside down and inside out. And very shortly before I was supposed to actually go in August, I received a call that my mother was very ill, and actually she died about a week before I was supposed to go to the Monroe Institute. So I thought that that was the wrong time to go, and that trying to explore consciousness wasn't the thing to do at this moment, but there was no way I could change my airplane tickets, nor would they return my money, so I decided, well, I'll go, and then I'll come back some other time. My impression of the whole thing was, at first, rather frustrating, because everyone was having all these experiences, and I wasn't, and I was sort of sleeping through exercises and things, and they kept saying, don't worry about it, your brain is getting it. And, you know, I at the time lived in southern Spain, and I kept thinking, you know, paying all this money to come here and learn how to have a siesta, I don't really need to do this, because I know how to have a siesta. But the truth is, they were correct, and it was working, and I started finally having some experiences like I'd never had before, of entering into states of total bliss, or actually leaving my body and seeing myself. And I was so impressed with it all that every time I had some money, I was back again at the Monroe Institute trying a different course.
How long was the first course? Was it like 3 days?
All of the courses are 1 week.
1 week, okay. So you started to have these experiences during these days, the first time you went there?
Yes, but it took me quite a number of days before I did. It was like on the last day when I really started waking up. Monroe Institute uses sound technology. There are different sounds in each ear, which very carefully studied in laboratory and everything, and very carefully chosen these patterns of sounds that we hear in each ear, facilitate the changing of our brain waves into these identified states of consciousness. One of the most important things that Robert Monroe did was identify different states of consciousness associated with different brainwave patterns. And all of this he did he started in 1958, so they didn't have all of the technology then, but you know, they were using, especially as time moved on, electroencephalograms to actually record how the brain changed with these sounds that we were hearing. And what they found was that if we don't have conscious resistance to the process, which means, you know, if you say, this is not going to work for me because I'm not going to let it, well, then it won't. But if you're in an open state and willing to sort of go along with it, these sounds provide the background for you to change into these different states of consciousness, and we actually start doing it within 5 minutes. One of the things that actually gave the technology its name, the technology is called Hemi-Sync, is because they also found that it synchronizes both brain hemispheres, which is an optimal state of functioning of our brain. We know that the hardware of our brain is learning new things at a very rapid rate, and that we go home with that learning already in place, so that we can get back into these states of consciousness at will, and that includes getting into a synchronized state of consciousness, which usually takes 15 to 20 years of intensive meditation to be able to do that. And in the matter of a week, people actually move into these states without the help of the sounds and stay there. And that means that they go into a synchronized state, and they go into, well, we start with a very deeply relaxed state, because for any of these kind of experiences, the physical body needs to be totally relaxed. And so the first state of consciousness, which Monroe calls Focus 10, which is just a number because he didn't want to give it any kind of esoteric name, because he was very Western, pragmatic-minded person. In Focus 10, we have a state where our physical body is totally relaxed, but our mind is still conscious, which is often not the case, because when our physical body is so relaxed, we're usually in deep sleep with delta brain waves, and we're not conscious of anything. But with these technology, he creates patterns of sounds, and some of those patterns, some of those sounds are taking us into this deeply relaxed state, while other ones are keeping us conscious. And so we can be actually aware and conscious, as are these people who've meditated for many, many years.
So there's a technology that can alter the state of the mind for different purposes, I guess.
Yes, for many different purposes. Of course, the ones that people at Soul Travel are probably most interested in are what we might call mystical types of experiences, but it also is extremely good for people who have problems with sleep, to help them relearn, their brain relearns how to sleep. It also is extremely useful for controlling pain. They did some incredible studies in London in a hospital about the use of Hemi-Sync for controlling pain and using less medication for pain, because as the body is more relaxed, there are less pain signals. And as it all started with trying to figure out how to help people get into a state of accelerated learning. Back in 1958, Bob Monroe, who designed all of this and developed the technology, was actually a radio and television engineer. He was a sound engineer working in radio and television, and he was sort of looking for new things to do, and had heard that the Russians were actually experimenting with learning during sleep. And he thought that was a very fascinating thing, and so he thought, well, how do we get people into this state of light sleep to begin with, so we can then read them texts or something that they can learn? And he started using sound to help do that, and used himself as his guinea pig. And after a while, he started sort of noticing